The sun is essential for life on Earth, providing heat and light necessary for photosynthesis, weather, and climate regulation. Its gravitational pull keeps planets, including Earth, in orbit. The sun also influences the entire solar system, shaping planetary environments and enabling life through its energy and radiation. But the sun is going through a predictable life cycle, and in about 5 billion years, it will undergo significant changes that will have dramatic effects on Earth and the other planets in our solar system. What will happen to the sun? The sun is currently in a stable phase of its life called the main sequence, where it fuses hydrogen into helium in its core. This process has been going on for about 4.6 billion years, and it will continue for roughly another 5 billion years. Over time, the sun will use up its hydrogen fuel, and as it does, its internal structure and behavior will change. Hydrogen depletion. As the sun exhausts the hydrogen in its core, it will begin to fuse helium and other heavier elements. This will cause the core to contract, while the outer layers will expand. The sun will enter the red giant phase. Red giant phase. During this phase, the sun will expand to many times its current size, possibly as large as 1.2 to 1.5 million kilometers in diameter, which is about 100 times its current size. This will have dramatic effects on the inner planets, including Mercury, Venus, and Earth. Mercury and Venus are expected to be incinerated as the sun expands, because the heat and radiation will increase enormously. Earth will likely become uninhabitable before it is swallowed by the sun, even if the Earth is not fully engulfed. As the sun expands, it will increase the temperature on Earth, causing the oceans to evaporate and the atmosphere to be stripped away. It's thought that Earth may be completely scorched and become a barren, lifeless rock long before it is engulfed by the sun. Once the sun starts fusing helium into carbon and oxygen, it will go through a series of helium shell flashes that will cause it to expand and contract multiple times. After this, the outer layers of the sun will be ejected into space, forming a planetary nebula, while the core will shrink into a dense, hot remnant known as a white dwarf. The white dwarf will be about the size of Earth, but extremely dense, and it will gradually cool down over billions of years. The white dwarf will no longer be able to support fusion reactions, so it will fade over time, becoming a cold black dwarf long after the end of our solar system's active life. As the sun transitions into a red giant, the heat and radiation it emits will increase significantly. Here's what will happen to Earth. In about 1 to 2 billion years, the sun will gradually increase in brightness and temperature. This will lead to the runaway greenhouse effect on Earth, where the atmosphere becomes hotter, causing the oceans to evaporate, and the surface temperature will rise drastically. Life on Earth will become impossible long before the sun enters the red giant phase. During the red giant phase, if Earth is not swallowed by the expanding sun, it will become a barren, scorched world. The oceans will evaporate, the atmosphere will be stripped away, and the surface will likely be too hot for any form of life. Final destruction. When the sun reaches its maximum size as a red giant, it is likely to engulf Earth. If Earth is not directly engulfed, the heat and radiation will make the planet uninhabitable long before it is consumed by the sun. What will happen to the other planets? Mercury and Venus. These two planets are closest to the sun and are expected to be completely destroyed as the sun expands into a red giant. They may be swallowed by the sun, or they could be vaporized due to the extreme heat and radiation. Mars might escape being directly engulfed by the sun, but it will still experience intense heat. The red giant phase will likely strip away any atmosphere Mars might have had, and it will become even colder and more inhospitable than it is today. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. These outer planets, being farther from the sun, are unlikely to be engulfed by the expanding sun. However, the increased solar radiation will cause their atmospheres and moons to experience dramatic changes. Some of the moons of these planets might be affected by the sun's increasing energy, potentially losing atmospheres or experiencing intense heating. After the sun's death, once the sun sheds its outer layers and becomes a white dwarf, it will no longer produce the intense heat and radiation it currently does. The remaining planets and objects in the solar system will continue to orbit the white dwarf, but life on Earth, if any remains by then, will be impossible. The gravitational influence of the sun will remain, but the solar system will be vastly different from what it is today. Timeline of the sun's future. 5 billion years from now, the sun will begin to exhaust its hydrogen and enter the red giant phase. 5 to 7 billion years from now, the sun will become a red giant, potentially engulfing Mercury, Venus, and possibly Earth. 7 to 8 billion years from now, the sun will shed its outer layers and form a planetary nebula, leaving behind a white dwarf. Billions of years after that, the white dwarf will slowly cool and fade into a black dwarf, and the solar system will remain a dark, cold place. Conclusion. The sun is not about to explode, but over the next 5 billion years it will go through a transformation that will make Earth uninhabitable and ultimately destroy the inner planets. While life on Earth will end long before the sun reaches its final stages, the outer planets may survive for a time, though they will experience significant changes.